Good evening. I'm Lisa Broom with the CBC Evening News. In our top story tonight, if you pull off the road to use your cell phone, you won't be breaking the law. This clarification came today from Transport Minister Michael Lashley. He was speaking against the background of a statement made by a senior police officer regarding the new provisions of the amended Road Traffic Act.
I just want to make it clear that there's no provision in the present amendments or even the law that was passed before that state that you must get out your vehicle to use a cell phone.
Mr. Lashley explains that particular amendment was made based on concerns from stakeholders that many of the accidents that occurred in recent times were the result of distracted driving, which included using cell phones.
The intent of the legislation basically is to deal with that driver who is on the highway, on the roadway, and using his cell phone. If someone pulls off the road, engine is running, that person is not impeding traffic, not obstructing traffic, and that is not the intent of the amendment to the regulations that we passed and laid in Parliament.
Meantime, Permanent Secretary Simone Rudder also clarified what is meant by the use of Bluetooth devices in the legislation.
Hands-free mode means the use of a cellular phone which A. is connected to or paired with an electronic device, B. is not held or operated by hand, C. is voice activated or requires one touch in order to initiate, accept or end a call, and D, does not require the wearing of an earpiece or headset. So I think that is clear as pertains to the various types of mechanisms which can be used to ensure that you're using hands-free mode in compliance with the law.
A senior police officer is surprised that people are still being reported for not wearing their seatbelts, as the wearing of seatbelts was the law in Barbados since 2001, and not wearing a seatbelt carries a $500 fine. Officer in charge of the Traffic Department, Assistant Superintendent Ronald Stanford, says people need to take their safety seriously.
Some mornings I check the morning report, and I see 20, 25. I'm surprised that people are still being reported for this offense. Seatbelts save lives. Seatbelts prevent injury. In fact, research done in North America and Europe suggests that they save lives, they save injury up to a more of 50% of the time. But so I would just encourage Barbadians to really wear your seatbelts. The kind of things that I hear people talk about, you get burned, no? What's a little burn? It prevents you from striking your body, your face against the dashboard or the windshield, which is certainly a more serious injury.
Regarding the use of car seats, the assistant superintendent says most parents are generally compliant. He says the law is clear and mandates that children under the age of 4 must be placed in car seats, which must be in the back seat.
Children in car seats is really for the safety of the child and the parent. I don't understand why a parent would want to go all into getting a child and then refuse to spend $400 or $500 to protect that child. Yeah, and we were in the past we were seen as harsh when a person was say getting a ride and the person did not have a car seat and they were asked or they were told that it's not safe, and we were accused of being harsh. But really it's about the reality of safety of the child, the driver and the parent.
Misleading and deceptive business practices have captured the full attention of the Fair Trading Commission. This is according to Chairman, Attorney at Law Jeff Cumberbatch during his address at the Commission's 14th annual lecture as the Commission works to create a safer environment for consumers.
The Fair Trading Commission is on the lookout for local businesses which attract buyers through dishonest practices. FTC Chairman Jeff Cumberbatch sounded the warning as he referenced Ouch Boutique's director Grenville Ricardo Del Peach, who was recently found guilty of selling fake products from Rihanna's Puma line. Mr. Del Peach is appealing his conviction. The FTC chairman says the agency is closely watching this case and other such situations.
This would have resulted in consumers being misled as to the standard, quality, style, or model of the goods purchased. It bears reminder that the Commission also has a statutorily designated role to play in this context, as Sections 13 and 15 of the Consumer Protection Act make clear that any such conduct is in patent breach of the legislation.
Is part of the Commission's push to constantly improve its service to the public. In addition, Mr. Cumberbatch says the Fair Trading Commission last year dished out one of the most significant decisions in its history. He says the decision on the proposed merger between Sol St. Lucia Limited and the Barbados National Terminal Company was by far the most critical decision for 2017 and perhaps the most publicly anticipated in the Commission's history.
This decision, regrettably, was viewed by some in purely partisan political terms as a victory for the incumbent administration if it were permitted and as a defeat if it were disallowed. Indeed, a premature, uninformed, and inaccurate disclosure of the decision by some sections of the press evoked defamatory imputations of incompetence and worse on the part of the Commission by some members of the public who were clearly disappointed with the incorrect disclosure.
He says the Commission will also continue to advance its more traditional consumer protection activities. Kareem Smith, CBC News.
A former government senator is questioning the opposition's chastising of government for borrowing money to pay wages. During today's Astor B. Watts DLP lunchtime lecture at the party's George Street headquarters, Reggie Hunt asked what was wrong with borrowing to pay the public sector. He says that is government's commitment to keeping people employed.
Government service is really overstaffed. We do know that. There are over 25 or 26,000. Some of them don't do a lot. But the point is that there are people who are employed, they have faces, they have mouths that have to be fed. To send home 8,000 or 9,000 people in Barbados, you're going to see a lot more of what we're seeing now. You're going to see a lot of paroles, you're going to see a lot of thieves, you're going to see a lot of crooks. 10,000 people in Barbados.
A suggestion has been made that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital expand dialysis treatment capacity in the short term. Chief Executive Officer Dr. Dexter James made the recommendation during a seminar marking World Kidney Day yesterday. Admissions to the hospital's renal unit are increasing.
We pretty much at capacity now. We moved from a contract of 24 patients being outsourced to 36. Now we're up to 43. The third-party provider that we currently utilize are pretty much at full capacity. So that we really need to look at a short-term solution for expanding capacity. This could be done by perhaps issuing an open tender to see if there are any private sector providers who may wish to set up a plan to provide patients. Certainly at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, we are at full capacity. We can't take one more patient, except someone dies, and then we could fit them in. But in terms of additional numbers, in terms of hemodialysis, we cannot accept any more patients.
Dr. James says a multidisciplinary team needs to work with people who are newly diagnosed with kidney problems.
Some have social problems, some relates to psychological problems, but we need a different setup to move someone from the state of denial, anger, depression, to the point where they accept the reality. And it is in that regard you would find that our healthcare providers can make good, meaningful sense to the treatment to such patients. Unfortunately,
our doctors in this loop do not have the time to sit and counsel and to find out about diets and to find out about the socioeconomics to prepare you for accepting the reality.
And in more news about the hospital, it will soon have 2 new manual beds thanks to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The check worth $12,800 was presented to hospital CEO Dr. Dexter James this morning in the hospital's boardroom. President of the East Caribbean Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, Pastor R. Danford Francis, says it's a privilege as a church to be involved in the continued development of Barbados.
We believe, like Jesus, that we should be involved in not only life of our members on Saturdays and the people on Sundays, but in the daily life of the people. And because we have sickness in the world, it means that the church needs to respond to sickness, and we deem it a privilege to be able to contributing to the improvement of the main hospital here in Barbados.
Dr. James says the hospital has received $12.2 million in donations and equipment from philanthropic initiatives. He says the new hospital has a prospectus outlining its needs, and he thanked and encouraged Barbadians for continuing to give. Now, the hospital's CEO says the beds are particularly important.
As we seek to modernize our equipment and make sure health technology keeps abreast and it keeps current, we have a program for the planned replacement of beds. So these 2 beds will certainly go some way in our change out of our beds to make sure that we have beds that are safe and secure for our patients. We give you the assurance that the funds provided today will not be commingled in our operating account. We keep these funds in a separate, restricted account to meet its intended purpose.
Despite encountering some hiccups with one of its major fundraisers, the Broadway to Barbados Charitable Trust is continuing to support the QEII. Over the past 5 years, it has raised over $2 million. Chairman Robert Bork says that money has been committed to different departments at the hospital, including the Medical Intensive Care Unit and the Pediatric Department.
We've allocated $559,000 to the Accident and Emergency Department. We've just taken on a brand new project, the respiratory unit, for $304,000, which includes some new bronchoscopes, a cleaning machine, and we are going to renovate the facility to facilitate the cleaning machine and also provide certain privacy so they can work on multiple patients.
He was speaking as CIBC First Caribbean Bank presented a check for the second portion of the $100,000 it pledged to support the cause. The bank's CEO, Gary Brown, says he's pleased to be associated with the venture.
I think it's wonderful that we can actually be a part of this work that Broadway to Barbados is doing in support of the hospital. And it actually fits very nicely with the other charitable work that we do. And I have not only the privilege of being the CEO of CIBC First Caribbean, but I also chair our ComTrust board, which is our charity board. And it's through that vehicle that we're able to make these kinds of contributions to ensure these types of needs are actually fulfilled.
Police are investigating a shooting incident which occurred sometime around 7:45 last night at 2nd Avenue, Thomas Gap, President Kennedy Drive, St. Michael. PRO Acting Inspector Roland Cobbler says no one was injured during the incident, but 2 vehicles and a house were damaged. He says coincidentally, ambulance personnel at the time were on duty along Thomas Gap Main Road, where they were responding to a report of a man collapsing along the road. He says the team was approximately 200 to 300 meters from where the shooting occurred when they heard the gunshots. Investigations are continuing. Police have turned to the public for assistance in identifying a person of interest who is wanted in connection with a serious criminal matter. The man was captured in this video in the streets of Bridgetown. Any person who can assist in identifying the man is being asked to contact CID Central at telephone numbers 430-7189 or 430-7190. They can also call the police emergency at telephone number 211, the nearest police station, or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-TIPS. We'll have more news after this break, so stay tuned. Barbados is preparing to mark Glaucoma Week next week, and given the prevalence of chronic non-communicable diseases coupled with the growing elderly population, officials are paying particular attention to the condition. Now, glaucoma specialist Dr. Dawn Grosvenor joins us live now to talk about that condition as well as plans for next week. Dr. Grosvenor, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start by defining for our audience, what is glaucoma?
Glaucoma is a chronic disease that affects the nerve of the eyes, and we've been doing this awareness effort for a few years now, so a lot of people have heard the term. And really often it's associated with raised eye pressure, and most people associate it in their mind with raised eye pressure, but really it's about the impact that the pressure is having on the nerve at the back of the eye. We've each only got one nerve in each eye, and anything that affects that nerve and damages it has the potential to damage the vision as well. Glaucoma is a chronic disease, so it is slow in onset, potentially progressive if it's left untreated or inadequately treated. And if it progresses and that damage to the nerve continues, it then starts to damage the peripheral vision, which is the side vision, and eventually that damage can close in and affect the vision we use daily and cause visual impairment.
Okay, so what then is the current situation with glaucoma in Barbados?
We know a lot about our figures for Barbados because of the data we have from the Barbados Eye Studies, but we've had this data since the 1980s, and I work almost exclusively in the field of glaucoma, and I see more and more patients who are affected by glaucoma, even though the overall number and the overall percentage of the population might be the same. We find that younger people, younger adults, are being affected by glaucoma. It is very rare in children, but one of the risk factors is a family history of glaucoma. And we know that if, for example, your parent had glaucoma, then your risk is higher. If that young person is going to develop glaucoma, the data has shown that often they will develop it 10 years earlier than their parent did. And so you can imagine as you go through the generations from grandparents, parents to their children, that with each generation presenting 10 years earlier and earlier, we're seeing younger and younger adults affected by glaucoma.
When you say younger, you're talking about in their 20s or 30s?
Potentially 20s, 30s. It is still a disease that presents more in people as they get older, but because of this family history link, I'm seeing the full range of adults. So in other countries where glaucoma is less prevalent, they will say you should start getting tested for glaucoma over the age of 65. Some places will say over the age of 40. But really in Barbados, I often will say as long as you're an adult, if you're over 21, you should get an eye check for glaucoma.
Every year? Or
not necessarily every year. You start, and depending on what is found, then if you're a young person, you might not have to be tested for 2 years or maybe 3 years, but at least if you have this strong family history, if your doctor detects that you are at greater risk, then they will test you annually.
Now, given the age range that you're talking about, I don't know whether, so do you get the glaucoma test when you go to get your eyes checked? So then is it often people who only wear glasses who get their eyes checked? So then that seems like it's excluding a significant part of the population.
That's an interesting conundrum, and something that we're really challenged by, because we've got so many eye care professionals in our field. When you see someone to get your eyes checked or to get your glasses checked, what is the difference? Now, the ophthalmologists or the eye doctors who are trained as medical doctors first and then go on to do further training in ophthalmology. And we're the ones who test for the diseases of the eye and treat the diseases of the eye as well. But more often people might see the optometrist, who is the professional who checks for glasses, contact lenses. They're also trained to detect the diseases of the eye, although they spend less time in that training than medical doctors do. If the optometrist, the person who's doing that initial check for you of your glasses, if they find that something is abnormal or they suspect that something isn't quite right, they'll refer you on to the ophthalmologist or the eye doctor, and then we're the ones who will make that definitive diagnosis. But you're right that if you have perfect vision and you never see either of those two sets of professionals, then you are left to your own devices just through your own level of awareness and level of initiative to seek that further testing. And part of the push during Glaucoma Week is to encourage people to do that, because there are many people who might not wear any glasses at all, and those are the people who are more likely to go their whole life without coming in contact with an eye care professional. During the week, we're offering free testing, and we want to encourage people who have never been tested before. Those are the ones we want to prioritize for that free testing. And in fact, that's one of the screening questions that will be asked when people call. Have you ever been tested before? Because we want to check the people who've never had an opportunity before.
Now, let me ask you this question about treatment. You are, in our conversation earlier, found out you're the only glaucoma specialist on the island. But does that mean that the treatment is readily available here, or do people have to go overseas for it? What's that situation?
No, not at all. We have the full range of glaucoma treatments available here. We have had for some time. All of the ophthalmologists are trained in treating glaucoma, but my particular specialty is in glaucoma surgery. And that is required if persons are using the regular treatment, which is usually eye drops, sometimes laser treatment, and those things aren't working, then we have to progress to something else. Glaucoma, like I said, is a lifelong disease, and almost like how people have their blood pressure monitored regularly, and there are times when it might be high and you need to change your medication or adjust your lifestyle. With glaucoma, there are times that the eye pressure changes and we might have to change our strategy accordingly. If we exhaust all the options that are simple and straightforward, then we have to progress to glaucoma surgery and considering that, and that is usually when people come to me.
Okay, so then just going back now to the week of activities, you talked about the free testing. This is testing at a variety of establishments across Barbados.
Yes.
What else is happening for Glaucoma Week?
Well, like you said, the ophthalmology and the optometry practices together opening their doors and offering free testing across the island from north to south, east to west. We always try to do that because we really want to give people an opportunity and not to have finances be a barrier. So that testing is free, but it is by appointment only. So if someone knows an eye care professional, they need to contact them so they can book that early. On Monday night at 7 p.m. at the university, I'm giving a lecture, the public lecture entitled Glaucoma Surgery Revelations, where we can hear a bit more about glaucoma surgery, what is possible, what we're doing, and what our outcomes are. I think the revelation for most people is just in the title, that glaucoma surgery is possible and it is successful. So that should be interesting for members of the public, and I want to encourage them to come out to that. This event is really held in conjunction with the University of the West Indies because I'm a lecturer in ophthalmology at the university, and this is our 70th anniversary celebration, so this will be in conjunction with that committee.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dawn Grosvenor, glaucoma specialist, talking about Glaucoma Week that's coming up next week, and she's encouraging people to go and get testing done.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Grosvenor. Well, on this date 48 years ago, the country was plunged into mourning following the tragic death of musical stalwart Jackie Opel. Well, today, family members, friends, and fellow musicians gathered at his gravesite to pay tribute to the man widely regarded as the greatest Barbadian singer of all time. Sharika Griffith was there and filed this report.
Even though he lived a relatively short life, Dalton Sinclair Bishop, more commonly known as Jackie Opel, made an invaluable contribution to music in Barbados. And yet, as Culture Minister Stephen Lashley acknowledges, only after his death did Opel receive the national recognition he deserved.
It was felt by many of his friends and fans that Barbados did not understand Jackie Opel, and therefore he never got the recognition and the musical break that he had deserved right here in his homeland. However, his legacy has gained gradual recognition from his countrymen in recent years. In 1998, the government of Barbados had built the Jackie Opel Auditorium in his memory, and his music has been introduced to a new generation through numerous acknowledgements by local artists such as soca singer Edwin Harewood.
The minister was speaking during a rededication ceremony following the refurbishment of Opel's final resting place in the Westbury Cemetery. The ceremony was attended by his family, including his daughters Rhonda and Julie, as well as several members of the musical fraternity. During his tribute, veteran entertainer Richard Stout called for the creation of a Spooch Festival.
You have a reggae festival, but you have no spooks festival. And it belongs to us. How can you turn your back on something that belongs to you? The people who are in charge of entertainment in Barbados must make sure that spooge is featured at the festivals. You cannot bring your best promoters and producers of talent all over the world and introduce them to a talent spectrum, and you don't have your own music demonstrated to the people.
Founding member of the Troubadours International and director of Clyde B. Jones Funeral Home, Ken Jones, who was pivotal in the restoration of Opel's grave, called on musicians to breathe new life into spooge.
Call it another name, I don't care. Maybe as I said, 2 teaspoons full of spooge, 2 cups of top, half cup of raga soca, a cup of bashment, and we can mix up the brand and maybe bring out a beat that we call Barbados. Crop over, we should be playing our music. We should have our own beat.
The restoration was undertaken by COSGAP, and CEO Erica Smith used the ceremony to announce a new scholarship in Opel's honor.
COSGAP, given its commitment to helping with the development of local music, will, as of the 2018-2019 academic year, be offering the Jackie Opel Scholarship for students pursuing the Associate Degree Program in Music at the BCC. Tuition will be paid for the 2-year program for the successful student, and a new scholarship will be awarded annually.
The ceremony concluded with a group of entertainers singing Opel's Eternal Love around his grave. Sharika Griffith, CBC News.
Thanks, Sharika. And still to come, a look at some of the stories making headlines across the region. Questions about when violence against children will end are being asked as police continue their investigations into the shooting death of a 4-year-old boy in Belize. He was shot and killed as he stood in front of his home earlier this week. The attack is the latest in a string of shooting incidents in Belize City in the past 2 weeks. We have this report from Channel 5 Belize.
My people with the cross and my father-in-law to eat. It's a ma. I go across the street and my grandpa go eat. So I said, baby, go bed. He said, I go across, go eat until I go and then I come back. But when they don't eat now, my father-in-law, they outside to fix the vehicle. All of them, they outside, so they play in the yard. So he said he go across. When the shooting started, he dug behind the vehicle. So when he see everybody run, he decided to get up. And that's the way where the bullet just ricocheted off of the car. So he died.
It is believed that the single round that struck young Trayshawn in the right side of the head rebounded off the engine cover of this vehicle, which remains parked inside the family yard. The indentation, as well as the spatter of blood, points to where he got injured. Amid the ensuing chaos, during which his uncle, 25-year-old Ian Abraham, was also shot, first responders overlooked a second victim. The elder parent, whom the children had followed out onto the street side moments earlier, was oblivious to his grandson being mortally wounded.
Everything happened so quick, according to the grandfather. Nobody even knew that. They expected that, little Trayshawn was injured till somebody saw him on the ground with his hand behind his head.
Something went terribly wrong on Monday night. Suffice to say that Trayshawn was never the intended target of the deadly spray of gunfire. The men were attending to a vehicle when they were ambushed in a drive-by attack.
Bermuda, a man on a 2-horse carriage lost his life in a freak accident. The 69-year-old was thrown from the carriage and died from severe injuries. We have this report from ZBM TV9.
There were several eyewitnesses to the incident involving a horse and buggy.
I heard a noise. Apparently the part of the carriage just popped off and the horses must have got spooked and they just dragged him down. I instantly got off the bike, ran across the street, down the road just to see what was going on, and he was already down. There was a woman trying to talk to him and everything, trying to feel for his pulse. And then I see the horses, and the horses, they look like they just went and got tangled all up. One of the horses looked like the leg got tangled 3 times already before. It was not a pretty scene at all.
A second eyewitness who knew the person involved was also shaken up by what he saw.
I was just backing in tractor trailer in Korea Construction's yard, and I noticed 2 horses coming. Hubby Charles driving them, and I sat there waiting to see him come across and speak to him, being that I own 2 horses myself. And when I looked, the horses took off. But what I think happened was the harness had broken on the horse buggy, and the pearl to the buggy had dropped to the ground and started scraping, and it spooked the horses. So the horses took off, and he couldn't control the horses. So I jumped out of the tractor trailer, ran down the hill behind the horses to, try to help him. When I got there, he was on the ground out, and the horses was on the side, all tangled up and broken legs and whatnot.
Veterinarians were also on hand at the scene, there to euthanize the 2 horses involved.
They weren't there at the time, but the vet had came and had to put them to sleep because once the legs are broken, they're done no good.
Police investigators took photographs of the scene to document the aftermath of the crash. Tractor trucks shortly after removed the horses' bodies from the road.
We'll have a glimpse into the world of sports in just a moment, but before we get to that, here's a tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Anti-doping rule violations number 6. Doping is defined as the possession of a banned substance and/or method. This fact is brought to you compliments the National Anti-Doping Commission.